Friends, good afternoon. We are so excited about Dream Week here at Wesley in partnership with the Pursuit Gathering. And each day we are having a dialogue as well as chapel services to celebrate and commemorate the life and legacy of Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Today we are so excited to welcome our special guest, Miss Shutaveya Ward. Shutaveya works in activism, community activist. She is also the relationship manager for 70 times 7 Life Recovery. And we have invited her today to share some of her experience with us as it relates to her work. And so Shutaveya, thank you for joining us on this call for this lunch this afternoon. We're so glad that you're here today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so grateful to be able to share a bit of my story with you all.
Absolutely. Shutaveya, I've just got a few questions for you to start our conversation. And first, I'd love to know, tell us more about your work in activism. Tell us about what you do and why is it important?
Sure. So I first began doing things in the community as far as activism in about 2016. I was the teen center director at the Boys and Girls Club of Greater Holland at the time. And I had a bunch of club teens coming up to me wondering how they could interact with police without being killed. So these kids were watching videos on social media of police officers um, murdering people that look like us, and they were afraid. And so it began a dialogue that I had with the Holland Police Department. I also wanted to include people in the community that are leaders. So we invited the city council members, we invited local pastors, we invited people that we thought would have something to say in this conversation, but also be able to teach our kids how we could move forward. And so that first conversation happened in 2016. And it kind of really opened my eyes to the fear that our Black and Brown young men and young women have. And I also became a mother that year to a little Black boy who one day is going to be a big Black man. And so every time I saw someone who was an African American male being murdered, being chased down, not only just from police, but from people that felt like they weren't supposed to be in their neighborhood, or they shouldn't have knocked on their door, or whatever, it kind of created in me an urgency that I have a voice, I have a platform, and I need to use it. So most recently this year, in July, once everything kind of opened back up and everything kind of went live on social media with George Floyd, I was reached out to by one of my Boys and Girls Club kids who was actually at the conversation in 2016. And she really wanted to do something in Holland, in our community, to show that we weren't going to stand for this kind of behavior, and that the only way that we could move forward as a community is if we came together in unity. And so we brainstormed with a couple of other local leaders, and we planned, it was called George's Peaceful Demonstration. We didn't call it a protest because that's not what we wanted it to be. We wanted to invite the police, which we did. We actually had conversation with the police before we even invited the public. The police actually picked the location of where we were going to meet because we wanted it to be a partnership. We wanted to work together because that's the only way that we're going to move forward as a community. We invited the local church, and we also invited the community. And we had thousands of people in the small community that I live in, very Dutch, very conservative. We had thousands of people show up. And we had hundreds of people driving by, honking their horns, just really excited that there was something positive happening, and also that we were showing that we can come together in a positive way. It doesn't have to be a riot, it doesn't have to be a fight. It just has to be us coming together and saying, we stand together. Black, white, red, brown, we stand together. And in our community, we're not going to let this happen because we work together in this community. And so that's kind of what I kind of exemplify for my son. It kind of reminds me of a quote that Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. said. He said, "Darkness cannot drive out darkness, only light can do that. Hate cannot drive out hate, only love can do that." And so that's really what my goal is in my community work and my activism. It's about bringing people together, because if we're not bringing people together, we're not doing it right. We're all the same deep down. And, in this country, there's a lot of division, there's been a lot of hurt. And when you get underneath that hurt to the bottom of it, we're all the same. We all bleed the same blood, and we all, are all a part of the human race. And so, getting back to remembering that is really one of my goals with my community work in Holland.
Thanks so much for sharing that with us. One of the questions that I have for you, and it sparks up um, just some thoughts that maybe trigger um, our reality living the Black experience. And Dr. King, would say the time is always right to do what is right. And my question for you is, as you've looked at your activism in that community and you've seen and lived this Black experience, what are the ways that we can go forward? You mentioned the word unity. And we know that as we think about this from a Christian worldview, the scripture tells us that we're blessed to live in unity together. How good and pleasant it is for brothers and sisters to dwell together in unity. My question for you is this: what do you think is the solution? Is there a solution for getting past some of these things? What is the way forward in unity, and can we do that? Because I've asked the question as it relates to a ministry context. My heart and my passion and my desire is to see a church that's freer from racism, that reflects Revelation 7:9, John's vision of seeing people from every tribe and language and tongue coming together. And it seems that every time we take a step forward toward unity, there's always something that's there to push us back. And so my question to you is, what is the way forward? How do we go forward, and how do we live more fully into the dream that Dr. King had for us?
Yeah, that's a loaded question, Jeremy. I really believe that reconciliation has to happen at some point in some way. We have to reconcile that our differences have driven us apart in the past, but we can make the decision that in the future and for future generations, we are not going to allow our differences to divide us. And I think that's what Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. really wanted to have be a point for him. Yes, we're all different, but we're more alike than we are different. And if we can just get to the bottom of loving one another, like Christ said, the greatest commandment, love him, love your neighbors. That's it. If we can just simply do that, we can get to a better place. But there is a lot of hurt. There's a lot of turmoil. There's a lot that has been done to the Black community by the government, by people that are put in place to protect us. And so that's why I say reconciliation, because there does need to be a conversation of, this has happened in the past. We take ownership of that. And this is how we move forward together. So, kind of restoring that dignity and bringing hope, really.
We see a lot of quotes on MLK Day about faith and unity and people coming together. And I don't know any other way except to keep it real. I have struggled. I've struggled with understanding um, some of the thoughts behind those quotes on unity, as I've seen and had my own experience as a Black man in the United States. Um, and feeling like an outsider, that I'm not supposed to be here or not welcome to the table as others. And so my question to you is this: as a Black woman, as someone that has worked as an activist and continues to serve in their community as an activist, what is what would you say is the answer to Dr. King's dream? Have we realized his dream? Have we really stepped into understanding what it is to see brothers and sisters come to the table of equality? Do we have we realized his dream to see brothers and sisters from diverse backgrounds come to the table and be able to really sing together that we're free at last? What do you say to that?
Unfortunately, the answer is absolutely not. Um, if we, if the last year of what has happened in this country is any evidence, it seems that we're not very far from where we were when Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was marching and saying "Free at last," and that is what I did this June. Is I marched. My 4-year-old son marched against injustice, the same injustice that happened in the 60s is still happening today. Yes, we're recording it now and we can see it, and more people are starting to understand it. But it's the reality of the life that we live. I live in Holland, Michigan. I'm a Black woman and my name is Shutaveya. It has not been easy for me. I'm an educated woman and I can speak for myself, but it is still an extra hurdle that I have to jump over, even to be invited to the table, even though I'm qualified, even though I have a voice, even though I have something valuable to add. Um, I'm not often considered, I'm not often taken seriously. And so that is what I think Martin Luther King Jr. wanted, is for that to happen. We're not there. You know, I I I struggled this past year with my relationship with God, because the same people that prayed with me and sat with me in church, the things that they said on social media, and the way that they truly felt about a statement as simple as Black Lives Matters, truly showed that they weren't my brother or my sister. Because for me to say that my Black life matters shouldn't be offensive to anybody. I'm not saying that anyone's life doesn't matter, because my life matters. Um, so I think that we are, even just having the conversation about it and talking about it is moving in the right direction. But again, it's that dignity that is, you have to earn if your skin color looks like mine. And it's just, it's the same fight that we've been fighting since we were freed. So over 100 years, and we're still talking about the same struggle.
It's an interesting dynamic, isn't it? Especially when you think about the philosophy that Martin Luther King carried, and um, you see the experience of people that are of color, folks that lived have lived this experience in a racist world. um, I guess my question about hope comes to this: why now, and why is it important for us to grasp and understand the vision of Dr. King today? What does it mean for us, and what are the implications for future generations? You mentioned your son, you and he marching, and I think of my two children. um, what do we do going forward? How do we affect change in this climate? How do we make that happen?
Well, one of the ways that we can affect change is what I do for a living. So I work for an organization called 70 times 7 Life Recovery. And what we do is we help to restore the dignity of those who have been incarcerated. In this country, Black men are by far a minority, but are by far the vast majority in the prison system. when our men and women are released from incarceration, they come out with trauma. They come out with PTSD. They come out having lost years of their lives um, to a system that was never meant to um, care for them. And so, what I do at my job is I speak to people like they are people, and I love on them, and I give them hope because our futures do not have to define, or I'm sorry, our past do not have to define our futures. And so, what we do here is we walk alongside of these people that are returning from incarceration. We help them get the tools and the skills that they may not have gotten while they were incarcerated. When a person is incarcerated, the entire time that they're incarcerated, their life kind of pauses or stops. As the world goes on outside of that prison cell, that prisoner is still in that same space. So let's say someone goes to prison when they're 18 and they get out when they're 28. They still only have the skill set of an 18-year-old. They still have only have um, the learning patterns of an 18-year-old still. So we are working to help bring people back to where they need to be, helping them to learn, helping them to be able to stand on their own. But we also take it a step further, the reconciliation that I was speaking of earlier. We have a program within 70 times 7 called Clear, where the police work with people that are on parole. Um, it is not an easy relationship when a lot of people that are released from incarceration have fear, resentment, all types of feeling towards the police because of how they were arrested, what happened in prison, what have you. The Black community has a very um, uh, torn relationship with the police going back to, the 1800s, right? So trying to reconcile that relationship, trying to build trust in the community, that's really how we're going to move forward. It's going to take all of us, and it's going to take all of us moving forward, but it's also going to take all of us being transparent. And so that's what I love about what I do at my job is that I get to help people find that hope, um, find that dignity. When people are released from incarceration, they come out, they don't really look you in the eye. They say yes, ma'am, no, ma'am. They are afraid. They have been treated like less than human, three-fifths of a human, if you will. And so when we work with that population, it's very important for me to let them know that when you're here, you're safe. And it's our goal to make sure that you feel safe in this world, even though you haven't been protected by the people that were supposed to protect you. And you haven't been made to feel safe in the prison that you've been kept in. Um, so it's going to take all of us. It's going to take all of us working together. It's going to take the people that are in leadership. It's going to take the president of the United States on down, but I just want people to remember that every single voice matters. And I think that's what people forget. Like, oh, I'm just a secretary. I can't say anything about this injustice because no one's going to listen to me. Well, it doesn't matter who you are, where you are. If there is injustice, speak up. If there's somebody that you see that's being mistreated because of the color of their skin, their sexuality, their weight, whatever it is, speak up. We all have a voice, and it's going to take all of us working together to restore that hope and dignity for each and every human in this country.
Wow, that's truth. That's real talk. And the reality is the fight for justice never dies. It never dies in that. We're called to it. We're called to be agents of change. We're also called to be people of reconciliation. one of my last questions, or maybe it's not so much a question, maybe it's a wondering, and maybe it's something that we can unpack a little bit, is this. So Dr. King had this dream, and as we look throughout scripture, we find so many points where Jesus is praying for unity, and there's such an important call to unity. I've wondered over the last few years, as we've seen changes within our government, we've seen changes within um, our nation. There's so much unrest right now. We've experienced an insurrection at the Capitol. Um, there's been killings and riots and all of these things, and everyone is so polarized. You're either on this side or that side. You're black or you're white. There's really no in between. And the question that I have is is the unity that we've prayed for. The prophet said, how long, Lord? How long do we wait? Is the unity far off? Is this the hard work of unity? Because as we're working for unity, we would think that things would be peaceful, but in reality, we are saying we want to be unified. And so what does that really look like for our society? And I'm not asking you to answer this question, but I'm really asking those that are watching to begin to consider, what are the ways that you are being called into stepping into unity with your brothers and sisters? Um, what are the places? What are the spaces? And how are you being crafted to step into being a unifying agent in your society? Because as we look at the work and the life and the legacy of Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, we know that that was his work, that was his calling.
Right.
And beyond that, it is our calling. It's actually a commandment, the second greatest commandment, to love our neighbor as ourself. And so, friends, I just encourage you over this week, as you continue to view these moments as we celebrate Dream Week and we commemorate the life and legacy of Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, that we think not only about his words, but we also put those words into action. You and I have been called to love on people. We've been called to treat others with dignity and respect and with honor. And the reality is, when we do that, we honor each other and we honor God. Shutavia, thank you so much for being with us today. Thank you so much for offering your wisdom and your insight. It's been great to have this conversation with you. And friends, as we continue on this week, you can keep logging in and finding more conversations. We'll have chapel again tomorrow morning, as well as Friday morning, and we'll have another conversation on Thursday with Miss Kama Mitchell. So thank you for your time today, friends. We hope that you have a great morning and afternoon. God bless you guys. We'll talk to you soon.